On October 11th, 2014, Jennifer Laude, a trans woman and a citizen of the Philippines, was found dead in a room at the Cell Zone Lodge in the seaside city of Olongapo. Her body was discovered late in the night by lodge staff. Her head was submerged in the toilet bowl with bruises on it, and she was half naked. Jennifer was remembered by her parents and friends as a kind-hearted woman who always lent a helping hand to those in need. What happened to her that night? How could the beloved 26-year-old lose her life in such a terrible way? Today we will take a closer look at the murder of Jennifer Laude. Jennifer Laude was born Jeffrey Laude on November 4th, 1987. Not much is known about her upbringing other than the fact that she was loved by everyone around her. Later in her life, she was engaged to a German man named Mark Suselbeck. Mark is said to have loved Jennifer very much, but Jennifer couldn't go to Germany to live with Mark as she hadn't been granted a visa yet. This meant they could only see each other when Mark visited the Philippines and had to have a long-distance relationship. Despite being far apart, they planned to get married in 2015. Jennifer had her own life in the Philippines, and on one night, October 11th, she decided to hang out with her best friend, Barbie Gelviro. They went to the Ambience Disco on Magsaysay Drive. While talking and having drinks, the two women met Joseph Scott Pemberton, a 19-year-old Lance Corporal in the U.S. Marine Corps, and his friends. Pemberton, apparently an anti-tank missile operator from New Bedford, Massachusetts, and fellow sailors wrapped up a joint exercise between American and Philippine military personnel that day. His ship, the USS Palelio, was docked at the Subic Bay Freeport in Olongapo. Pemberton and Jennifer were said to be infatuated with each other. They left the disco together and went to a nearby motel, the Cell Zone Lodge, for a one-night stand. Jennifer's friend Barbie decided to wait for them in a different room. 30 minutes after they got to the motel, Pemberton left by himself. According to witnesses, it looked like he was in a hurry, as he didn't even bother to close the room's door. Soon after, Jennifer's body was found by staff. The discovery shook Barbie, who had been waiting for her friend. The news also shocked Jennifer's family. The Regional Crime Laboratory Office released a report after an autopsy on Jennifer's body. It concluded that she passed away due to asphyxiation by drowning as water was found in her lungs. There were also bruises on the top of her head, eyes, cheeks, and around her mouth. Her neck was said to be almost black due to strangulation. In addition, there were abrasions on her lower back and left forearm. After he heard the news, Mark flew to the Philippines 9 days later to mourn the death of his fiancée. Her body was laid to rest on October 24th at Heritage Memorial Park. While Jennifer's family mourned her death, people wondered who would have carried out such a crime. Barbie came forward as she was with Jennifer for most of the night. She said Pemberton was the last person Jennifer was with before she took her last breath. According to other witnesses, Pemberton took a taxi back to Subic Bay and settled into his ship. One of his shipmates later said Pemberton admitted to what he had done, only saying he left Jennifer unconscious in the bathroom. After hearing what happened from Barbie, Jennifer's sister, Jennifer Laude, filed a murder complaint against Pemberton on October 15th. The case gained attention from the public as well as the government, as it wasn't only a matter of murder, but also the relationship between the US and the Philippines. Marlowe noticed that Pemberton was still being pampered with his privileges according to the Visiting Forces Agreement and not treated as a criminal suspect. She wished the court was much stricter. Pemberton's case was always handled by the US government instead of the Philippines, despite the country's jurisdiction over crimes committed by US service members. Pemberton remained in the custody of the Department of Foreign Affairs, which made the public upset. When the investigation started, Pemberton wasn't handed over to the Philippine police and was interrogated by the United States Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Throughout the investigation and trial, he was only detained on his ship, which was docked at Subic Bay. A preliminary hearing was held on October 21st. Surprisingly, Pemberton didn't attend. His lawyer, Rowena Garcia Flores, stated that he wasn't obligated to take part in the hearing. He was only asked to submit a counter-affidavit, a written statement that is made under oath to make a verified statement. Pemberton also didn't show up to a scheduled preliminary probe on October 27th. Rowena filed a motion that there was probably no cause for murder and asked the case be reduced to a homicide instead. There was an incident a couple of days before the preliminary probe. On October 22nd, Pemberton was flown to the Armed Forces of the Philippines at Camp Aguinaldo in Quezon City. Hearing this, Mark Susilbeck, along with some of the Laude family, including Merlo, climbed the walls of the camp to confront Pemberton. But they were met by officers, and that led to a dispute. Susilbeck and Merlo were escorted out of the camp. Susilbeck was deported back to Germany and blacklisted from the country. This angered the public further as they saw Susilbeck and Merlo were only trying to get more justice for the victim and make life harder for the suspect who was being spoiled by the government. Despite efforts by Pemberton and his team to get the case dismissed, the Laude family and their legal team persisted in pursuing a murder conviction. Pemberton's legal team maintained that they didn't know for sure if the victim had done something to make Pemberton feel the need to defend himself, and that injuries inflicted on the victim did not mean to end in killing the victim. This was rejected by the Laude legal team, which said that the evidence of his cruelty was apparent through forensic tests and science. At the time of the investigation, police found 3 condoms in the bathroom where Jennifer was found dead. These pieces of evidence were taken to a lab to see if the suspect's DNA was on them, as requested by the Laude family. The results of the analysis were released on November 28th. Pemberton's fingerprints were found on one of the condoms and the condom wrapper. Strangely though, the DNA found inside the condoms didn't come from Pemberton. That meant someone else may have had intercourse with Jennifer. But this didn't prove anything, and Pemberton didn't walk free. That's because witnesses saw him walk into the motel room with Jennifer. The lawyer of the Laude family said that many people frequented the Cell Zone Lodge, meaning multiple people used rooms on any given day. These findings didn't hurt the case, and Pemberton remained the main suspect. Weeks passed before the Olongapo City Prosecutor's Office filed murder charges against the U.S. Marine. The arrest was then justified by the Olongapo Regional Trial Court, Branch 74, on December 16th. Letters were sent to the U.S. Embassy to demand custody over Pemberton. He later surrendered himself to Philippine authorities and was booked. As all parties waited for the trial to begin, Pemberton and his team did everything they could to ensure justice for him. They submitted a motion for homicide along with a not guilty plea. A plea bargain was brought up during the second pretrial hearing on March 10th. The Laude family, meanwhile, tried to erase Pemberton's special treatment by sending a petition to transfer him from Camp Aguinaldo to a Philippine jail just like other criminals. This was rejected by the Supreme Court. According to those who attended the hearings, they were quite intimidated as Pemberton was escorted by a considerable number of U.S. service members. The hearings were held without media coverage as reporters were banned from entering the courtroom. The media relied on the Laude family to provide them with information about the proceedings. The fight for justice was a lengthy and exhausting process for the Laude family as they were up against a military government. It was also tough for them, as Pemberton's story kept on changing. He first admitted to choking Jennifer after she revealed she was a trans woman. Then he said he tried to help revive Jennifer with water after Dr. Raquel Fortin argued that there is a possibility the water found in her lungs were caused by a medical condition. In his testimony on August 24th, Pemberton said he took Jennifer and the other girl to the motel without knowing that they were transgender. He said the other girl left, and he tried to touch Jennifer's private parts only to find out that she had a male genitalia. Pemberton said things got physical, and he choked Jennifer until she was no longer moving, but was still breathing. In Pemberton's defense, Rowena expressed that he was feeling scammed and attempted to keep his honor as a man. Rowena called Jennifer a fraud, adding Pemberton fell victim to the sex worker. Pemberton added that it felt as if he had been sexually assaulted, as he was furious as well as repulsed by the realization. His mother also came forward, saying her son would never have the heart to kill anyone, as he was a God-fearing man. Laude's family lawyer, Harry Roque, insisted that this did not change the fact that Pemberton locked Jennifer in an arm choke until she passed out before dunking her head in the water. The act was seen as part of Pemberton's bigotry towards Jennifer. Mark Suselbeck agreed. He said the crime was due to Pemberton's own prejudice against the queer community. The trial went on for quite a while. Finally, on December 1st, 2015, the Olongapo Regional Trial Court Branch 74 found Pemberton guilty of homicide in Jennifer Laude's death. He was sentenced to 6 to 12 years behind bars. In March the following year, Pemberton's sentence was reduced by the court to a maximum of 10 years in prison. He was supposed to be transferred to New Bilibid Prison, which was known for its poor condition. But he was granted a special detention procedure due to the Visiting Forces Agreement. He also kept his rank and got paid his monthly salary. A Philippine news outlet reported that Pemberton had to pay over 155,000 pesos, or $3,300 for Jennifer's wake and burial. In addition, he needed to pay an extra 50,000 pesos for the moral damages of bereaved families and 30,000 pesos for the punitive damages he caused. In response to this, Jennifer's mother said that no amount of money could pay for the years she spent raising her beloved child. The Laude family had mixed feelings about the verdict, as the murder charge was reduced to a homicide. But they were glad that Pemberton was locked up and that justice was somewhat served. But their happiness was short-lived, as the Olongapo City Regional Trial Court granted Pemberton's partial motion for reconsideration in September 2020. Less than a week after that, on September 7th, he was granted an absolute pardon by then-President Rodrigo Duterte, despite the president's promise not to do so. Pemberton only served 5 years of his sentence. His lawyer, Rowena Flores, said that her client was pleased with the pardon. She added that Pemberton always wanted to apologize for his actions and express his remorse to Jennifer's parents and friends. He apparently wanted to meet the Laude family in person, but was advised to send a letter instead. The Laude family lawyer, Virgie Suarez, said Pemberton never sent a letter or initiated any form of apology. Pemberton's pardon was met with intense criticism. People were outraged and called the decision a travesty of Philippine sovereignty and democracy, as well as an injustice to all Filipinos. Pemberton was deported back to the U.S. on September 13th. He expressed gratitude to Duterte and supposedly apologized to Jennifer Laude's family. Harry Roque, the presidential spokesman at the time, said in a press conference the following day that Pemberton would face a court-martial upon his arrival in the U.S. But news reports said he would not face a court-martial as he already served time in the Philippines. He was administratively discharged from the Marines and he walked free. The murder of Jennifer Laude sparked protests about the international relationship between the United States and the Philippines, as well as about crimes against the LGBTQ community. Activists from the left-wing Philippine organization Bagong Alyansang Makabayan shamed the government's coddling act on the U.S. service member while treating locals like Jennifer in a less serious manner. #Justice for Jennifer Laude was a trend on social media as people protested the infuriating result of the case. It wasn't the first time U.S. service members committed crimes in the Philippines, but the Philippine justice system failed victims in their own land once again. This caused disappointment and heartbreak. Pemberton's pardon shattered the hope human rights activists had in holding U.S. service members accountable for their crimes against women while still using Filipino escorts exploitatively. The people of the Philippines took to the streets to protest. They demanded the abolishment of the Visiting Forces Agreement for the sake of equal justice. The murder of Jennifer Laude left a scar in the hearts of Filipinos, especially the queer community and loved ones. Mark Suselbeck found it hard to accept his fiancée's murder, as he felt that Jennifer's life wouldn't have been taken away if only the German embassy had granted her a visa to come with him to Germany. Akbayan Representative Walden Bello saw Jennifer as the symbol of an oppressed nation, repressed by an international soldier and let down by the government. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.